Hello, my name is John Bannon. I'm an attorney and philosopher. In today's video, I'm going to explain how superdeterminism destroys Richard Dawkins. This video is what they failed to teach you in college philosophy class about the philosophy of Richard Dawkins. When I speak of superdeterminism, I'm referring to a very specific, unique version of superdeterminism called Hansonian superdeterminism. It's based on a proof by Swedish theoretical physicist Dr. Johan Hansen, which you can find in the peer-reviewed physics journal Physics Essays, Volume 33, Number 2, June of 2020, pages 216 to 218. It is entitled Bell's Theorem and Its Tests, Proof that Nature is Superdeterministic, Not Random. Hansonian superdeterminism is not classic superdeterminism, which was first posited by Dr. John Bell in 1985. Bell's superdeterminism or classic superdeterminism involves hidden causal variables. Dr. Hansen disproved causation. So Hansonian superdeterminism cannot rely on hidden causal variables. Instead, Hansonian superdeterminism says we live in three dimensions of space and one hidden static dimension of time in a fourth dimensional block universe. And the only thing in this block universe, besides nothing, is particles. And these particles are set in place like pebbles in concrete. You can't change them, you can't move them, they're permanent. And this is because there's no such thing as cause and effect in physics. But particles do create patterns through the static dimension of time. And those patterns are described by our mathematical laws of physics. So, under Hansonian superdeterminism, all events or particles in the past, present, or future, they are all equally real. They all presently exist, and you cannot change them. The reason that you don't experience yourself from 5 minutes ago is not because you don't exist from 5 minutes ago. In fact, you do. You're in the block universe. It's that you are presently in a different location in the static dimension of time than you are 5 minutes ago, where you are presently still experiencing 5 minutes ago. And it's the same thing with the future. Uh, the reason you don't presently experience a future isn't because the future isn't already there. It's because the future is in a different location in the static dimension of time than where you presently are. Okay, so I've listed 5 points of the philosophy of Richard Dawkins on the board, and I'm going to go through each one and explain how superdeterminism disproves it. So, number 5, Richard Dawkins said that the church is a mental virus that replicates as psychologically infectious rather than factually accurate. However, under Hansonian superdeterminism, the entire history of the universe, past, present, and future, all exists. It's all equally real. It doesn't move. It's permanent, and it's there, even though you can't see it because it's in a hidden static dimension of time. And you're not in all locations of the dimension of time at once in the present, so that you could presently experience all of it at once. So the church is also predetermined in the static block universe. And the block universe was atemporally created by God outside of space time. Uh, in order for God to create a universe, a block universe, full of everything that's in there, including advanced technologies, God would have to know of and understand all those things prior to creating the block universe in order to create the block universe with those things in it. So he would have to be supremely intelligent. He would also have to have the knowledge of everything that he could make, which means he would have all knowledge or omniscience. And he would also be able to have to freely choose what to make and what not to make as real, which means he has free will. So God predetermined our universe and made Christianity the predominant world religion by number of members throughout human history. And from that, one can reasonably infer that God intended Christianity to be his true objective message for humanity. And the church is an aspect of Christianity. It was uh, founded by Jesus himself. So it's an aspect of the predetermined predominant church or of Christianity, which allows you to reasonably infer the truth of the church's claim to being the magisterium under Christianity. So the idea that the church is a mental virus is nonsense because you can reasonably infer God intended Christianity to be objective truth, including founding the church in order to teach Christianity. Number four, morals emerge from consensus. However, again, uh, God predetermined Christianity to be the predominant world religion from which one can reasonably infer the objective truth of Christian morals. Therefore, Christian morals have been objectively predetermined to exist in human history by God to be God's objective message and truth to humanity. So Christian morals are objective. They're not guided by consensus. Um, so that's the objective morals in our universe is Christianity. It's not the morals of consensus. Number three, teaching original sin is child abuse. Now, Dawkins' idea here was that um, the teaching of original sin to children creates uh, guilt and anxiety of eternal punishment in hell for the sins of other people, specifically Adam and Eve. Um, However, the doctrine of original sin actually has a fairly good foundation in Hansonian superdeterminism. And the reason is because all human events and acts, such as sinning, are predetermined. They all exist in the block universe, including all past, present, and future sins of humanity. Then one can say that future sins exist already in the block universe, and they arise from earlier original sins of humanity. So the entire course of human history is predetermined and exists at this moment in the block universe, and that history has sin written all over it. So, because there were sins um, in the future, there had to be original sins in the past in order to account for those sins in the future. So it is quite reasonable to claim that due to uh, the amount of predetermined future sinning that human beings are sinful inherently and originally sinful because those future sins originate with the earlier sins of the ancestors, even going back to the beginning. Number two, life is a natural product of the laws of physics. So Richard Dawkins claims that the reason there is life is because the laws of physics create life. However, this is completely false under Hansonian superdeterminism. And the reason is because the laws of physics can't create anything, let alone life, without cause and effect in physics. Life exists in the static block universe because it was predetermined to exist in the static block universe, not because the laws of physics caused life to exist. Under Hansonian superdeterminism, the static organization of the block universe is described by the laws of physics, but the laws of physics do not cause the organization of the static block universe. They're simply a mathematical description of the organization that's already there. So the laws of physics do not cause anything to happen. They're just a mathematical description of what is already in the block universe, which includes the life that already exists in the block universe. All right, number one, the ultimate Boeing 747 gambit. So there was a creationist named Fred Hoyle who said that claiming that evolution creates life is like claiming that a whirlwind went through a junkyard and assembled all the pieces of a Boeing 747 into place. In other words, the argument is that evolution is so improbable to create something as complicated as a 747 that why would you ever believe in evolution? Richard Dawkins uh, countered that argument with the ultimate Boeing 747 gambit. And he said that, look, if you don't want to use evolution to explain complexity, then you're left with an even bigger complexity to explain, namely God. So, how are you going to explain what created God or where the complexity of God came from? Doesn't it make more sense to explain the complexity of life through evolution than to explain the even greater complexity of a God who created life? However, Hansonian superdeterminism completely disproves Richard Dawkins' ultimate Bowen 747 gambit, and this is how it does it. In a Hansonian superdeterministic universe, there is no such thing as real possibility. That is, that things could have been otherwise. And the reason for that is there's no cause and effect in physics. So all events are predetermined, immutable, unchangeable, permanent. There's no chance they could have been otherwise. There's no mechanism that could have allowed them to be otherwise. So there's no real possibility in the static block universe. It doesn't exist. So if real possibility doesn't exist in the static block universe, then real improbability doesn't exist either. Now, that means that you do not have to explain where the Boeing 747 came from Because there's no such thing as the improbability of a Boeing 747. Because there's no such thing as real possibility. The Boeing 747 simply exists in situ in the static block universe. It wasn't caused to exist. It couldn't have been otherwise and not existed because there was no real possibility that it could not have been existed because it wasn't caused to exist in the first place. So there's no improbability concerning the Boeing 747. It's 100% certain, not improbable, certain, because it exists in the static block universe and you can't change the block universe and it's permanent. And nothing, there was no causal process or mechanism that created the block universe. Consequently, there is no improbability of the Boeing 747 to explain. So Richard Dawkins made a category error in his gambit by claiming improbability when improbability does not exist in the static block universe. Likewise, God, being uncaused, did not arise from chance, and hence there is no need to explain any improbability of God, because there is no improbability that God is subject to, because he's not caused either. There's no causal process that caused God to exist. So there's no improbability of God to explain. So you don't have to uh, explain the complexity of God or the complexity of a Boeing 747 because there's no real possibility that it could have been otherwise. Now, in a metaphysical sense, since our universe was atemporally created, there's a metaphysical real possibility that our universe may not have existed with the Boeing 747 in it. But that's on a metaphysical level. If you're looking at just the static block universe itself, then there was no possibility that the Boeing 747 wouldn't have been in it. So God, who's uncaused, decided to create our static block universe to include the Boeing 747. So there was no chance the Boeing 747 would never have been in our universe because God predetermined our universe to have it in it. Okay, so I hope you learned something about all the holes in the philosophy of Richard Dawkins. And I'll give you a second to look at the board. All right, until next time, take care.